Hello, my friends. I hope you're having a splendid day. My name is Ezra Anderson, and today we're going to create a cute space explorer in Affinity Designer. The first thing I'm going to do is an optional step to make a space explorer, but I want to have a black background, so I'm going to select the rectangle tool and then click and drag to draw a rectangle going across the document, and then I'll change its color to black. And just to make sure I don't accidentally move it, I'll lock it in the Layers panel by clicking on the lock icon. I just think having a black background is appropriate for a space explorer. Now we're going to make the body of our spaceman. We'll do this by selecting the Rounded Rectangle tool and then click and drag to make a rounded rectangle. We can make it more rounded by clicking and dragging on this orange handle right here. Then you can give it whatever color you want. Next, we're going to give our spaceman some arms. We'll use a rounded rectangle for the arms also, so I'm just going to duplicate this rounded rectangle that we already made. We can do that by pressing Command or Control J. Then I'm just going to make this rectangle a little smaller. And I'll rotate it by clicking and dragging on this circular handle at the top. And if you hover on the edge of the rounded rectangle, your cursor will change into this crosshair and you can move the rounded rectangle. Alright, I think that's looking pretty good, so now I'm going to select his arm and duplicate it for the other side. Remember, you can duplicate it by pressing Command or Control J, and then we'll click and drag to move it to the other side. Of course, we'll want to flip it, so I'm going to right-click, and then go down to Transform, Flip Horizontal. Then I'll bring it out just a little bit more. And now I'm going to change it to a darker color to show that it's behind the body. Using darker colors helps to add depth to your design. To make the red darker, I'm just going to click and drag this circle a little bit more to the dark area. And obviously right now our arm doesn't look good because it's on top of the body, but we can fix that by clicking and dragging on this layer and putting it beneath the body layer. Alright, the arms are looking good. The next thing we'll work on is his legs. We'll just use a simple rectangle for his legs, so let's select the rectangle tool and click and drag to make a rectangle. Then we can reposition it and put it beneath his body. I'm going to bring my leg up just a little bit so he's not so tall. And then I'll duplicate this rectangle and move it to the other side of his body. I'm going to make this leg the same color as his body though. To do this, I'll use the color picker up here and click and drag to select the color of his body. Then I'll apply it to the leg by pressing on this circle right here. To keep the Layers panel organized, I'm going to group all of these layers by clicking on the bottom one, and then while holding down Shift, I'll click on the top layer and put them in a group by pressing Command or Control G. Now we're going to make a simple face for our spaceman. We'll do this by selecting the Ellipse tool, and while holding down Shift, we'll click and drag to make a circle. I'm going to make his eye white, and then I'll give it a black pupil. We'll just duplicate this circle by pressing Command or Control J, and then we'll make it black, and then we'll shrink this circle to fit it inside of the eye. Remember to hold down Shift to keep your ellipse as a perfect circle. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see what we're doing, and I'll reposition this eye, and maybe make it a little bit smaller. Then I'm going to group these two circles by pressing Command or Control G, and I'll duplicate it by pressing Command or Control J. Then I'm going to select both of these groups and place them in the center of the body. I'll press V for the Move tool, and then position them in the center. By putting them in the center, I can now use the Transform panel to move them an equal distance from the center of the body. First, I'll select this top eye, and then I'll move it 100 pixels to the right by coming here into the X box and typing in +100. Then I'll select the other group and move it 100 pixels to the left on the X-axis by typing in -100. Now we'll give our explorer a mouth, which we'll do by selecting the ellipse tool once again. And while holding down Shift, you can click and drag to make a circle. And then we're going to cut out the top part of the circle to make the mouth. We'll do this by selecting the rectangle tool and clicking and dragging to make a rectangle. Then I'm going to bring it down just a little bit and rotate it ever so slightly by dragging on this handle at the top. Then while holding down Shift, I'm going to click on the circle so I have the rectangle and circle selected. Now we'll use the subtract Boolean operation to cut the rectangle out of the circle. The subtract Boolean operation can be found right up here. If you're not familiar with the Boolean operations, I recommend you check out our Complete Beginner's Guide to Affinity Designer, which you can check out in the video description. We learn all about Boolean operations and how to combine shapes to make beautiful designs. Now if you want, you can keep his mouth as black, or you can change the color to white if you want to. Then I'll press V for the Move tool and bring the mouth up a little bit. Then we can put all three of these layers in a group for the face. Let's see our entire picture again by pressing Command or Control 0. I think I'm going to bring his face up just a little bit on his body. And now it's time to give him a space helmet. To do this, we'll use the ellipse tool, and while holding down Shift, we'll click and drag to make a circle. Then we'll position it in the center of his body. We're now going to cut off the bottom part of this circle so it looks like the helmet is sealed to where his body is. Just as we did with the face, we're going to use a rectangle to cut out the bottom part of the circle. So let's get the rectangle tool and click and drag to make a rectangle. Then we'll bring it up until the rectangle covers his body. To see what I mean, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And you can see how there's this small gap right here. We want to make it so the rectangle just barely covers up his body. So I'll press V for the Move tool and bring the rectangle up a little bit. If you want to move the rectangle 1 pixel at a time, you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard. So I'll press a few times on the up arrow key to move this rectangle until it just barely covers his body. Perfect. Now we can press Command or Control 0 to see the entire document. And while holding down Shift, I'll select the circle layer as well, and then use the subtract Boolean operation. Now we can see that the helmet cuts off where his body is, so it looks like it's sealed to the body. We're now going to add some transparency to our helmet. To do this, just make sure you have the helmet layer selected, and then we'll use the transparency tool, which looks like a wine glass over here. The transparency tool allows us to take a layer from visible to invisible over a gradual period. To see this, all we need to do is click and drag from the center of his face out to the edge of the helmet. We can see that the white part of the gradient means that the layer is completely invisible, and the black part of the gradient means it's completely visible. That's the opposite of what we want in this case though, so I'm going to switch these two colors by pressing on this button in the context toolbar. Then we're also going to change this from linear to radial. I don't think it looks very good having the helmet completely visible on the outer rim, so I'm going to select this black color stop and then lower its opacity to around 80%. I also want his face to be a little more visible, which means we need the helmet to be more invisible where his face is. To do this, we'll click and drag on this slider and bring it more towards the black part of the gradient. Alright, now our Space Explorer has a great looking helmet. Let's put the helmet, the face, and the body all in a group. Then if we press V for the Move tool, we can resize and position our entire Space Explorer. And just for fun, we can always make another Space Explorer by duplicating this entire group. Just press Command or Control J, and then bring the duplicate Space Explorer over here. We can resize him a little bit. And if you want, you can always flip him so he's facing the other direction by right-clicking and going to Transform, Flip Horizontal. And if you want, you can give your new Space Explorer a different color by using an HSL adjustment. Just come over to the Adjustments icon and select HSL, and then we can change the hue of our new Space Explorer. I'll also lower the saturation just a little bit. Alright, that's looking great. And there you have it! You now have all the skills you need to make a cute Space Explorer in Affinity Designer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next Affinity Revolution tutorial.